Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Techsperts presented by Buchanan Technologies. In this edition, we are joined by Chuck Ma, Director of Cloud Strategy at Buchanan Technologies, as he explains the steps businesses can take to get the most out of their cloud licenses and see a return on their initial cloud investment. Just a quick note before we get started, we have provided some relevant documents and links and encourage you to take a look at those to supplement the information presented today. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the video.
Great. Well, today I'm going to talk about Buchanan Technologies' assessment process. What you see here on the screen are the major steps we would follow to ultimately get to a licensing optimization position. We start with the baseline, and that's really taking an inventory of what Microsoft 365 licenses have been purchased to date. We'll then do an analysis of the baseline, where we look at things like what licenses are assigned, what's being used. We'll take a deeper examination of the user accounts. Then we'll make some recommendations on how the licenses can be modified to better utilize your spend. Next would be implementation, where our team would make the changes from the recommendation stage. And all of these steps combined would lead to an optimization of your Microsoft 365 licenses. So let's dig in and talk about what the baseline is. On this screen here, you'll see a snapshot of a typical Microsoft 365 licensing environment. Well, you can't really read all the small details, and that's okay because they're not really that relevant to our talk today. But just to give you an idea, this customer has Exchange Online Plan 1, there's some Microsoft Business Basic in there, and there's various other licenses. When we zoom in the column titled Available Licenses, we typically like to see this column have a fairly low quantity, preferably 0 or even a 1. But if there is a higher number in this column, that means there could be a large number of licenses that are being paid for but not being used. And in this example, if you look at Exchange Online Plan 1, you can see there are 38 available licenses. And further down, we see 36 Microsoft 365 Business Basic licenses that are not currently assigned. Now, there could be a good explanation as to why these licenses aren't being used. For example, this customer may be planning to hire some resources and therefore need those licenses in their tenant to be ready for those new hires. Or perhaps they've had a recent workforce reduction due to seasonal labor or that type of thing. In the second image in the back, you can see that there's something called Rights Management Ad Hoc, where it shows nearly 50,000 available licenses. Now, we don't worry about these because these are licenses Microsoft puts into a tenant for free. So they aren't costing the customer anything. And in fact, it's good for us to see if there's any sort of partial uptake on that particular license and the features that come along with it. Continuing with our analysis, the next thing we'll be looking at is the user list. On screen, you'll see a subset of a customer's user list, and we've changed the names to protect the innocent. So let's go ahead and take a more critical look at the users. In this first group of users, the first column shows that the block credential values have been set to true. This means that the users are not allowed to log in, and yet in the third column under the licenses, you'll see that they are actively consuming licenses. So these are potential licenses that could be removed from those user accounts, and the customer can pick up some cost savings. Well, let's look at the next block of users. Now, if you look at these names of the users, there are things like ResCorp Info, Orders, Service CS, and Simple. So they might be something along the lines of generic mailbox accounts, similar to sales or support at companyname.com. So these mailboxes are assigned licenses too, and they may not necessarily be needed. They could be turned into shared mailboxes, and the appropriate users could be given access to those mailboxes, potentially freeing up even more licenses. In this last group of users, you can see that the names are somewhat suspicious. The first two are called Test and Test 123. And then you've got Service Migrate 1 and TT-SYS Admin. So in this scenario, test accounts might not need the license for a full year or even for the period of time that they're assigned here. And if that's the case, they could be removed from those accounts. So our analysis really goes and looks at how all the licenses in an environment are being used. And then we would come up with our recommendations. In this example, for the folks that have their credentials blocked, we would recommend unassigning the licenses. And if the data needs to be saved, then we can look at converting their emails to shared mailboxes so the necessary data can be preserved. In the case of these generic accounts, again, we could turn those into shared mailboxes, unassign the licenses, and remove them from the tenant. We could remove the licenses from the test accounts, And then the last two there would constitute a discussion with the customer to determine whether licensing is actually required or not for those accounts. Once we've gone through our recommendations and presented them to you, we will have reached the implementation phase. This is where we work with the customer to determine which of our recommendations they want to put into place. We don't necessarily have to do all of them. We could just do a subset of them. And the end result would be a more optimized licensing environment. So just to recap, here are the steps we've gone through. We've done the initial baseline, which again is an inventory of the current licenses. We've completed the analysis where we took a deeper dive into available licenses, license usage, and user accounts. And from the analysis, we've provided recommendations to determine what steps should be taken to reduce the number of unused licenses. And finally, we implement the recommendations based on customer feedback, completing the licensing optimization assessment. So what are the next steps? Well, we recommend that you move to the Buchanan CSP. With that, you'll receive monthly license reviews, where we review what you have in your environment and advise you of any excess licenses you might have. We'd also do quarterly optimization assessments, which is what we walked through during this video. And lastly, we would be able to help you enable more Microsoft 365 features for your business. Some of your licenses may allow you to access more Microsoft applications that you aren't using today, such as Teams or SharePoint Online, and we can help you there as well. In addition to the ongoing optimization of your licensing environment, we find that customers in our CSP save time and money by having us manage the day-to-day so they can focus on bigger initiatives within their organization. Here, you'll see even more benefits of partnering with Buchanan for your cloud and licensing needs.
Thank you so much for all that information, Chuck. I think that just about wraps us up. If you have a question about any of the information that was presented in this video, Chuck's contact information is on the screen now, and you can feel free to reach out to him directly. If you have a more general question about Buchanan and our services, please send an email to the email address listed on the right side of the screen, which is solutions@buchanan.com, and a Buchanan representative will be in touch shortly. I'll leave this slide up on the screen for a little bit so you can get the information you need. And again, please be sure to take a look at the resources that we've provided. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you.